Finally, here we are. It's game week, everyone. Ohio State and Texas, number one, number two, number one, number three. Pick your poll. Does it really matter? It's huge. And of course, we get the crew to break it down for us. Special guest Chip Brown, 247 Sports, and the regulars, Kevin Noon, right next to me. BuckeyeHuddle.com. Check out his work every day. BuckeyeHuddle.com. And of course, the Big Me podcast. Steve Hellwagon down below. Bucknuts 247 Sports. Guys, how we doing?
Doing great.
Doing well.
If you can get to the stadium and everything that you've talked about before we started to record here can work its way through. Once you get to kickoff, then the adrenaline starts pumping, and then you can focus on football and covering a game at least.
Yeah, I can't believe that it's time for this. I mean, Ohio State started practice 6 months after it beat Notre Dame for the national championship. I mean, it was a very short off season for them. And then to have just played Texas 7.5 months ago and to turn around and play them again is pretty amazing. To have it be a 1 versus 3 game is pretty amazing. I mean, they've never played a number one team in a non-conference game. To my knowledge, at Ohio State, they've never opened against the number one team in the country in the poll started in 1936. So that's like 90 years of history there. So all kinds of things. They did play a 1 versus 2 game at Ohio Stadium with Michigan back in 2006. People remember that. But otherwise, this is the very next one that would be on that register of big games, I would think.
Kevin, we'll let you take the opening comment here along with Steve, and then I'm going to hit up Chip with the opening question, and then you guys can take it away from them there, and I'll lean back and enjoy.
Take the opening comment. I mean, I just, to echo what Steve has said, this is, it almost still seems surreal for a game of this magnitude to be right out of the gates and everything else. And, we did talk about it when we were in Dallas and snowy Dallas for the college football playoff semifinals that, for one team, it was going to be, back-to-back games, and the other one would have one game in between before, the season opened. And you sit there and you see all these programs with different opinions on how they should stack their schedules. And, we'll pick on Curt Cignetti at Indiana because he certainly was very vocal about how everybody should be doing things. And, Indiana doesn't play anybody in the non-conference. So I had just done an interview earlier today talking about, which strategy do I prefer? And I think, why don't you sit there and figure out where you're at? This, the loser of this game isn't suddenly out of the playoffs, isn't suddenly, having to hit an inside straight or anything like that. I mean, the winner of this game certainly is going to have a leg up on a lot of other teams out there. But, this is good to figure out where you're at. This is good to figure out, where your deficiencies are, maybe where you're ahead of schedule, and just how you handle this type of game because, Texas in the SEC, Ohio State in the Big Ten are going to play some marquee games along the way. So you may as well figure it out now in this type of game rather than getting a false positive by playing Grambling or Ohio University or, whoever else you could add to the schedule.
And before we get to the question for Chip, I'll just throw in there, we're starting to see the casualties already with Alabama and West Virginia canceling an upcoming series. Ohio State, after this Texas series, is supposed to play a 2-game home and home with Alabama and one with Georgia as well. Those are in the offing. So you hope that those stay on the books, even as the SEC goes to 9 games. And again, with this 12, 14, 16-team playoff, you can afford a loss or two, particularly to a power team in the non-conference, and still make the playoff. I'm almost calling it a tournament at this point. So, Jesus, why don't we just – I made this comment. Why don't we just make it a 135-team playoff that starts with play-in games for the bottom 7, get it down to 128, then get it down to 64, just like the basketball tournament, and that's the whole season. And then you can just book willy-nilly games between each other once you've been eliminated.
Yeah, I think we're especially going to see those non-conference games drop off for those 4 SEC teams that play already those rivals in the ACC. So they already have the automatic Florida State, Georgia Tech,
Yeah.
Clemson, Louisville matchup. So they're not going to add another one of those.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Chip, let's get started with this. So I posted a video the other day with my keys to the game. So if these guys don't hit any of these keys, I'm going to hit you up at the end. But we'll start with this. We had you on 6 weeks ago, something in that range. Is there anything different about this Texas team today? Anything you gathered from camp that makes you feel any different about their ability to go out there and compete for a championship?
Yeah, I mean, they've had some injuries on the offensive line. They lost Andre Kojo to a season-ending knee injury. He would have been, at worst, their number 3 tackle. He was battling with Brandon Baker for the starting right tackle position. And starting left tackle, Trevor Gooseby, has a hand injury, but I think he's going to, cast it up and play. They need him. He's their best offensive lineman. So I think, that's certainly a big area of concern for Texas, which has 4 new starters on the offensive line from the game that they played against Ohio State 8 months ago. So, I think that's the thing that jumps out, stands out. But, everyone's talking about Arch Manning, and I'll say this. I think the Texas defense is going to determine if the Longhorns have a say in this game or not. That's the swag of this team. And if in 05, Vince Young was the swag for the Longhorns walking out on the field, this time around at the Horseshoe, it'll be the Texas defense. And Anthony Hill Jr. at linebacker, Colin Simmons, coming off the edge. And a bunch of, Ethan Burke coming off the other edge, who's 6'5", has an 83-inch wingspan. He looks like Max Crosby. And then a bunch of, really talented athletic dudes in the secondary. But that's what stands out to me. I do find it interesting that these two teams have met 4 times previously. Texas won in Ohio Stadium. Then Ohio State came to Texas and won. Then Ohio State went to Texas in the Cotton Bowl and won. So it seems like, whoever's playing in each other's turf.
It favors Texas.
Right. I mean, we'll see about that, but it is interesting. They did have that one Fiesta Bowl meeting as well. But, when they've met in each other's states, the visitor has won.
Which kind of underlines Ohio State's lack of dominance in huge non-conference games at home. I think Ohio State just wins games because they're one of the top 3 or 4 most talented and best teams in the country. But Virginia Tech in 2014, Oklahoma in 2017, Oregon 2021, their most recent home contests in these big non-conference games have gone the wrong way. And they've beaten these teams on the road.
Yeah, it is interesting, no doubt.
We'll see. I think it's so interesting that you have 2 young quarterbacks trying to establish themselves in this game. I mean, for Arch Manning, I talked to David Cutcliffe at SEC Media Days. Cutcliffe coached, Peyton. He was the offensive coordinator at Tennessee. He was the head coach for Eli at Ole Miss. And he said, there's never been a quarterback in my lifetime who's had more pressure, more attention, more glare than Arch Manning. And he gets to make his road debut in front of 102,780, probably 105,000. How many fans are going to be there Saturday?
105. Yeah.
105.
Yeah, they have capacity 102, but they will, for this game, have 105,000 people, I believe. So
so he gets to open on the road against the defending national champs in front of 105,000. And for Julian Sayin, hey, you're handing this guy the baton to maintain the defending national champs winning streak here. And, by all accounts, I'll let y'all talk about Julian Sayin. It sounds like he's got, a great mental makeup. Which defense can get these guys off their mark, get them uncomfortable, get them to make the big mistake. Because I do think this game is going to be, it could be ugly. I think it could be dominated by the defenses. There could be a lot of punting. There could be some field goals. I don't know that it's going to be, these dramatic big plays and high flying. As much talent is on the field at the skill positions, I don't think it's going to play out like that, but we'll see.
Yeah, I will just add that yesterday ESPN Bet did their kind of weekend preview of the college games, and Greg McElroy, as well as their handicapping guru, whose name escapes me, they both preferred the under, which has dropped from like 50 to 47.5, something like that. And so, when you look at it, Ohio State favored by 2.5, they're talking about, like what would that be, like a 26-23 game or something screwy along those lines. Greg McElroy was more inclined to take Texas plus the points, whereas the handicapping guru noted that Ohio State at Ohio Stadium, that Tennessee showing from last December was pretty awe-inspiring, and that they have a pretty good home field advantage typically at Ohio Stadium. But I think Ryan Day's 35-3 or something like that at home, or I don't know exactly what the exact number is, but it's pretty impressive. So, I guess, he was, the handicapper was inclined to lay those points, but a lot of opinions on this one. And you're right. I want to ask you about Manning. He started 2 games, it appeared, last year. He filled in against Texas San Antonio when Ewers got hurt, and then started the next 2 games. One of them was a blowout, and then they played Mississippi State at home. Is that how that all cracked up, and how did he do in those 2 games, I guess?
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, Quinn Ewers goes out with what turned out to be an oblique strain. He goes into the tent, and on Arch Manning's first play, he throws a touchdown. Then they hold the defense. The defense holds. He comes back out and runs for a 67-yard touchdown. He scored twice before Quinn Ewers even got out of the medical tent.
Wow.
He finished with 4 touchdowns passing, 1 touchdown rushing. Then he's the starter against ULM.
Yeah.
He got greedy. He tried to throw deep when he shouldn't have. He tried to throw over the middle when he shouldn't have. He got intercepted twice. And Texas still won the game against Louisiana Monroe 51-3. But to me, it was that next week when he started against Mississippi State, he had learned his lessons. He goes, 26 of 31 for 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. He ran for another touchdown, and he learned from his mistakes. He didn't, try to he loves the deep ball, and that's going to be very interesting. Does he lock on? Because he did lock on to his deep target against ULM, and he got burned. I wouldn't be throwing deep with Caleb Downs back there. He's the second coming of Earl Thomas. So how disciplined is he? Major Applewhite told me I became a good quarterback when I learned the value of a check down. And we'll see if he's learned that, because he does love to throw that deep ball. And I don't know that that's a great recipe against Caleb Downs. So, and I'm interested to see which team can run the ball in this game, because 8 months ago, Ohio State had the 70. Well, that was a pass, but
yeah.
They averaged 3.4 yards per carry. Texas averaged 2 yards per carry. Stupidly, college football still, takes the sack yardage out of the run totals instead of the passing totals like the NFL. But that's that's going to be a big part of this thing. And, Texas has 4 new starters on the offensive line and a left tackle who's going to have a hand in a cast. Ohio State has new tackles and new running backs. So Texas has seen C.J. Donaldson before, though, when he was at West Virginia. He's impressive. That dude's a football player. He's a former tight end. He's tough as nails. He's hard to bring down. I don't think he's going to be the starter, at least from what I'm hearing, but I imagine he's going to see the field quite a bit. That dude's he's a load.
Yeah, that's kind of what we've experienced in the limited amount of times that we've been able to watch practice. I think Kevin would agree that he's been impressive between the tackles in the very few practices that we got to see as a changeup back. I mean, Peoples could reprise the Travion Henderson part, and Donaldson could reprise the power back Quinshon Judkins part. And Ryan Day yesterday was talking about the true freshman Bo Jackson from up in Cleveland, Ohio, who goes, I believe, in the 220 range, maybe 217. I don't know exactly, but he's a guy that can also get some run. I don't know if we'll see him get 10 carries in this game against Texas, but he's going to be counted on at some point as well.
Is Hartline calling the plays?
His debut. Kevin, what do you think about that? I think serving at the foot of Chip Kelly last year probably gave him a master's degree in how to put together an offense.
Well, and we also learned at the end of interviews that he'll be calling from the booth. So, I really feel that, for the people who are like, yeah, he's calling plays in name only. If you were going through a whole charade, you would still keep him down on the sideline because he'd be down there to look in the eyes of his receivers and everything else. But by putting him upstairs, this does not feel like a work. This feels like, this feels like it's real. So we'll see. Ryan Day was asked yesterday about being on the offensive channel and, his interactions with Urban Meyer when he was offensive coordinator. And basically, in short, it was like, yeah, it's no place for the timid to be on that channel, but you got to sit there and defend your decisions, but you better be right.
Yeah.
Where was Chip Kelly? Was he down or was he up?
He was in the booth. Yeah. They talk about how it's more than just looking at the call sheet on Saturday and picking out a play. It's, again, formulating the game plan, repping the plays in practice to see what works and what doesn't against the different looks, and, culling it down to just the plays that you think can attack this defense. And obviously Texas, if Ohio State had the number 1 defense last year, Texas could very well have it this year. So that's going to be a very difficult matchup, I think, for Ohio State going into this game. Obviously Texas succeeded in holding down Jeremiah Smith last year, but some of the other guys like Carnell Tate was able to make a few catches. They've got Brandon Ennis has kind of replaced Emeka Egbuka as the third wide receiver. I don't know if we'd call him 1, 2, 3, but and then the tight end, Max Clare, transferred in from Purdue. Has there been some trepidation on the Texas side about, okay, we've got a plan for Jeremiah Smith that worked tried and true, but they've got 3 other guys who could really hurt him?
Yeah, I mean, you have Michael Taft. Derek Williams was out with a knee injury for the Ohio State game, but he's back and he's a junior playmaker, had a interception against Michigan, had a big forced turnover against Oklahoma. And, they put Makuba over the top of Jeremiah Smith, and Makuba is now with the Philadelphia Eagles, awesome player. So there's some new faces that'll be on the field for Texas. But Texas would live with, they knew Carnell Tate was going to be a problem. And he was 7 catches. He helped move the chains. I think Egbuka had 5 catches. G. Scott had 5 catches. So, they're going to live with that. And focus on making sure that Jeremiah Smith doesn't do to them what Jeremiah Smith did to Notre Dame in the final minutes of that game. So, that's the plan. Easier said than done. It'll be interesting to see how Julian's saying, because Will Howard had discipline. He was a fifth-year guy. He saw the safety over the top of Jeremiah Smith and said, okay, I'm going over to Carnell Tate, I'm going to Buka, going to G. Scott. How does Julian saying handle that? Because when you've got a weapon like Jeremiah Smith, you want him to have the ball. And I'm sure they'll do different things. I'm sure they'll run some wide receiver screens with Jeremiah Smith where they can throw it to him behind the line and let him, use that athletic ability, hand it to him. That's what's so interesting about this matchup is that they've got film one-on-one, these two teams, and how they approached it 8 months ago. And there's going to be some new wrinkles on both sides for this one.
I got one of the Texas talking heads, a guy that I used to work with, and a guy I think Kevin used to work with at another Texas site, was comparing Ryan Wingo with Jeremiah Smith. And he said, the Ohio State guy is how he referred to Jeremiah Smith. I'm sorry, when you don't know the name of the number one player in all of college football, that doesn't smack of a lot of respect. And he said he preferred Ryan Wingo over Jeremiah Smith, right? Whatever. But I'm kind of jesting here, but Texas has some pretty good playmakers out there on the perimeter. So who are some of the guys that Arch is going to be relying upon?
Well, Jeremiah Smith has done it. I mean,
yeah.
It's hard to argue with 76 catches, 1,315 yards, and 15 touchdowns, and what he did, to Notre Dame, what he did throughout the playoffs. I mean, he was a monster in the playoffs. He dominated every game except the game against Texas. And, Texas is going to lean on DeAndre Moore Jr., who's the leader of that room. He may not be the most, prolific, dynamic, whatever, but he is very talented. He's similar to Matthew Golden in what he can do. And Ryan Wingo, okay, this is your close-up. You were behind Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond and DeAndre Moore last year. So you only had 29 catches. Okay, now you're the guy. How does he handle that? Does he take to it like, moth to flame, or is it, are there jitters? So I think that's what everyone's watching in this game Saturday, because I think there are really high expectations for Ryan Wingo. I think Texas fans expect him to be wide receiver one, to lead the team in catches, receiving yards, touchdowns. And so this is the first big test for him. And, he and Arch Manning have been working on the second team offense for a year. So he's got familiarity with a lot of these guys because they were all in practice together running on the number 2 offense. And Wingo was one of those guys. So, the third receiver, I thought it was going to be Emmett Mosley the fifth, the Stanford transfer who had a sensational freshman year, caught 46 passes, 6 touchdowns. 4 of those touchdowns were on 4th down. I mean, they really trusted that kid, but I don't think he's going to play Saturday. I think he's got an ankle injury, and I think he's going to be out. And so you're probably going to see this redshirt freshman named Parker Livingstone, 6'4", white guy. They call him white chocolate, white lightning, every terrible cliche for a white receiver. But he's Arch Manning's roommate. And, if you want a good laugh, I'm not on TikTok, but apparently Parker and his brothers, it's the Livingstone brothers. They do all these bits and skits on TikTok, and it's pretty viral. Kid's got a sense of humor. But yeah, I think those will be the 3 receivers you see the most on Saturday. And then Ohio State has Max Clare. He was the top tight end out of the portal. Texas got the number 2 tight end out of the portal in Jack Endries from Cal, who had 56 catches last year. I think he's going to be a big impact guy. I think he and Arch have a good connection. So that's a number 88 at tight end. He's a guy to watch.
Let's get to these super chats. And as I do, Chip, I'll extend on that question about the wide receivers because you dropped a name in Matthew Golden. And it's one thing to replace the athleticism. It's one thing to recruit at the level that Texas does and to march out all these guys that we just mentioned, Ryan Wingo in particular. But what Matthew Golden did down the stretch last year, he might have been arguably the best wide receiver in college football. If you're just looking at making big catches in huge situations and producing, I know Jeremiah Smith is one of a kind, but if you're just talking about productivity, he was amazing last year. And to replace a clutch receiver is different than just replacing the athleticism.
Yeah. I mean, Matthew Golden, it was interesting. Sark talked about how he came from a air raid system where, there's no plays. It's like they yell out numbers. Lincoln Riley has a play sheet on an index card. And so it took him a while to learn an offense with terminology and concepts and having to put it all together. So he got off to a little bit of a slow start, but you're right. He became an absolute, he got the end zone targets. He was the guy on third down. He was, he came up huge in game after game, even some games that no one was paying attention to where he had to have it. Like they beat Arkansas 20-10 and Golden had the game-winning touchdown. He's gone. If you haven't done your fantasy draft yet, he's worth a pick in there somewhere with the Packers. I think he's going to be really good. But DeAndre Moore Jr. is, he's number 0. He's that guy right now. I think he's the guy they trust the most on the big plays, third down. And then we'll see. Wingo, he's got all the tools. He's 6'2", he's 217, he runs 4.3. Now it's just time to do it. Put it on tape.
Super chats coming in. Jackson Johnson, we appreciate you. Of course. Let's get Ohio State VOCFB to 10,000 subs. We're pretty close. I think 9,200. Buckeye Huddle to 40,000 subs. Texas VOCFB to 10,000 subs. And Horns 247 Sports to 10,000 subs. Jackson is a numbers guy to the nth degree, as he shows us there. Jackson also coming in with this one. Also, let's get Bucknuts 247 Sports to 20,000 subs. So he has kept track of everyone. Those are the goals, everyone. Let's go get them. Robert, thank you so much for the super chat there. Just simply no question, but thank you, gentlemen. Robert, we appreciate being appreciated. And of course, Chip joins us for this special edition. And so we thank Chip for showing up because he's got all sorts of things going on in his profession and preparing for this game. So Chip, thank you for being here. Matthew, how many carries do you expect from CJ Baxter? I thought 4 to 6 until Sark said what he said 10 days ago. Now I'm thinking about 8 to 12. He is a big X factor.
Yeah, CJ Baxter's fascinating because he tore his LCL and his PCL. And if you talk to orthopedic surgeons, that's a tough recovery. It's a tougher recovery than the ACL. And, you've only got 4 stabilizing ligaments when you tear 2 of them. That surgery needs to go really well. And then, you've got to have the belief that your knee is going to hold up. And that's what I think has impressed Sarkisian the most. CJ Baxter's a fascinating character because his girlfriend, Mia Scott, was the third base player for the national champion softball team. And she tore her ACL, did not have it repaired, finished the season with 1 ACL, and then was like, yo, CJ, I won a national championship with 1 ACL. What do you got? And wow. She apparently put her national championship trophy on their nightstand. So it's the first thing he sees when they wake up. But
Oh, poor guy.
yeah, I mean, I'll say it might still be 4 to 6 carries because, Quintravian Wisner is the guy who proved himself when they had to have it against Texas A&M. He carried it 33 times for 186 yards and became a instant Longhorn legend in a 17-7 win at A&M. So, I still think Wisner, who I think had about 15 carries in this game against Ohio State 8 months ago, will be the lead guy. The guy to keep an eye on, in my opinion, is number 6, Christian Clark. Tashard Choice, the former running backs coach, he's now coaching the Detroit Lions running backs. He told me that Clark has traits that Bijan Robinson has, like the most make you miss ability, the contact balance, breakaway. The guy's a ball of muscle. He's like 5'10", 210, but his quads, his guns. I mean, the guy is like physically impressive. He had an Achilles tear. He came back in 7 months. I'm interested to see what he looks like in this game. I think he'll get some carries, and I hate to be like cautious or pessimistic about CJ Baxter. If he looks really good on Saturday, man, that's an incredible rehab that he's done to a really serious knee injury. He also was a gap scheme runner in high school, and Texas kind of majored in the outside zone last year, or 2 years ago, and he kind of struggled with it. I mean, that zone run is a different animal than, the gap scheme where what hole you're supposed to be going through. You're following a lead blocker oftentimes. So that's going to be interesting to me too. How much better can you get running in a zone scheme when you're out injured, So I think you'll see all three of those backs on Saturday.
Robert, thank you for the contribution and coming back with another one here. Thank you for that. Ryan Day seemed to be far more confident in his interior D-line depth than what he was in the spring. That was very encouraging to me.
Yeah. Speaking, would have been yesterday, I guess, on Tuesday, Ryan Day talked about, Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry being on the outside at defensive end, Caden McDonald, Edric Houston, the new starters at defensive tackle. And then he kind of dropped some other names like Will Smith Jr., Taiwan Malone, and the true freshman, Jarquez Carter, who he said has some twitch about him. He said some of these freshmen may get the opportunity to play in this game, but will certainly, if not, help us as the season goes along. It would be interesting if Jarquez Carter gets a few snaps in this game, coming in as a standout freshman. Just looking up his size real quick. Jarquez Carter, 6'1", 288 is his size. He's from Newberry, Florida. He was one of the top recruits in this class. So it'll be interesting to see if they throw him out there and see what he can do against this Texas offensive line.
Maybe I'll lead with Kevin and Chip, combination on this one in regards to, let's stay with the Ohio State defensive line, but let's focus on the pass rush. So we mentioned, of course, Chip, you ran down Arch Manning's performances last season. He was, unlike Julian saying, here's the experience difference is obviously he was on the field in meaningful games against big opponents, big situations, but not as the quarterback that needed to convert 3rd and 12. He was the run option. He was the 4th and 1, the 3rd and 2 guy. So in terms of being on the field in those situations, yes, he's had that experience, but in terms of having to deliver in the pocket, now, obviously, the Buckeyes could make this difficult on him to get comfortable. But on the flip side, if Texas pass pros against Ohio State with unproven pass rushers, that's one of the reasons why the Buckeyes went and got Bo Atkinson out of the portal from North Carolina. You create a situation where a young quarterback who's inexperienced throwing the ball against one of the best defenses in the country can become quite comfortable all of a sudden if he can stand back there and pat the football. So obviously Ohio State's ability to generate a pass rush against Arch Manning is going to be critical.
Yeah. I mean, I think, that's the other element to Arch is his athletic ability. Can he escape? Can he turn a sack into a 5 or 6 yard scramble? Quinn struggled with that. I think some of that was his injuries. Arch, had a 21-yard run against Georgia. That he created out of, after a drop back gone wrong. But he also, he took some sacks last year too. So how's his processing? And that's the part that I'm very, very interested to see, because you would think after having an entire offseason, even with some new characters in his, skill group, that his processing should have sped up. And that's where I'm interested to see. And does he lock on to the deep receiver, that kind of thing? Because, he I'm going to say it again. He loves that deep ball. He's going to look for it. But look, he got hit hard in that Ohio State game. He says he was not concussed. I think some others would maybe disagree with that, but he said that he texts with his grandfather Arch every day, and every text exchange ends with "get down, get out of bounds." Take it from a guy who's hobbling around, because Archie was a scrambler and could make some plays with his legs, and he paid for it. And so he's trying to tell his, grandson, hey, learn from Gramps over here.
Maybe Gramps also adds on those texts, get drafted by better teams than I played for. We'll do the deal that we did with Eli.
Oh my gosh.
With a good franchise. We'll do that.
He was the puppet master there for a whole NFL offseason, wasn't he? Goodness gracious. That was crazy.
Yeah, and he jumped out and told Texas Monthly that Arch will be back at Texas in 2026. Arch said, I don't know where he got that. I'm taking it day by day. He said that Archie apologized to him.
Apparently. I mean, you talk about, liking the deep ball, and all these things take time. And, I think that the belief from the Ohio State side of things, not necessarily from the program, but from amongst observers and everything else, is that the biggest X factor is largely the offensive line for Texas. I mean, just, you talked about the walking wounded players that are going to have to play hurt, a lot of new names, everything else. And while Ohio State is not bringing in Sawyer, Tuamoloau, Tyleik Williams, or whatever, I mean, they're still pretty talented. And, will they force Arch to have to look to the tight end underneath? And, will this be more, National League small ball, station to station type of football, trying to, extend drives rather than throw haymakers?
Yeah, and it would not shock me to, Sark loves 12 personnel. He always has. He plays a lot of 2 tight end. He uses the tight end as eye candy to try to help the quarterback determine if the defense is in man or zone coverage by putting that tight end in motion and reverse motion. And it wouldn't shock me if he keeps those tight ends in until he sees how or adjusts to that, depending on how his tackles are handling Ohio State's pass rush. So, I think they'll do everything they can to protect them. And even if it means they're sending, 1 or 2 receivers out on the route, his running backs are always a safety valve. So, but he's got to look over there. Every quarterback, is always downfield, and they forget, okay, I got this running back sitting over here in the flat. Looks like he can pick up 4 or 5 yards.
We've got memberships available here at Ohio State at the Voice of College Football. They're scrolling at the bottom of the ticker there with Block O Club. JT wasn't short, and we don't give a damn. Those are your 3 tiers. Become a member today here at the Voice of College Football. Get your special emojis and benefits as a member of the Voice of College Football, Ohio State. Chip Brown's here, 247 Sports. There you see where you can catch his work, Horns 247. So to cap off the most recent conversation about Arch Manning against the Ohio State defense, Sawyer gone, Tuimoloau. I mentioned Bo Atkinson. So Kevin, pass rush, a concern?
Well, I guess we'll see. We were, rewind 12 months ago, and there was concern about Ohio State with all of its guys not getting home. And they seem to have made some adjustments as the year went on, and we're getting home more often. What do things look like under Matt Patricia? How does the collaboration between Patricia and Larry Johnson work out with how they're going to deal with the line? But I just finished writing my tale of the tape, which will air tomorrow over at Buckeye Huddle. I put as one of my biggest X factors, will Ohio State be able, I don't think Ohio State needs to sack Arch Manning 5 times to be the great equalizer. You just have to speed him up. He's still a young guy. He still doesn't know what he doesn't know. To touch upon earlier points, this isn't coming in and trying to pick up 3rd and a long one. He's going to be out there, 1st and 10, 2nd and 2, 3rd and 14, whatever you may have. So Ohio State just has to speed him up. And I think that, I like Ohio State's defensive line against the Texas offensive line, but I'm basing that off of paper. And we know games aren't played on paper.
We've talked very little about Julian Sayin. And here's the guy that's completely inexperienced other than throwing a couple passes in garbage time. I see where Anthony Hill's come back, Chip, with 8 sacks. What does the Texas pass rush look like in store for Julian Sayin?
Well, I think this Texas defense has a chance to be what Ohio State's defense was a year ago. Number one. I mean, I think this Texas defense is that talented. They're deep at the edge. Colin Simmons is a freak. He had 9 sacks. He never started a game. I mean, I don't know how I'm mystified. They stuck with Trey Moore, and he finally came around. But they benched Ethan Burke, who led the team in sacks as a sophomore. They benched him for Trey Moore, who did nothing for the first 6 games of the season. Then finally against Vanderbilt, he made a play on 3rd down, and it kind of sprung. He's the one who hit Carson Beck and knocked him out for the season. And he forced some big fumbles down the stretch of the game or stretch of the season. He's now at linebacker because he's a tweener. And so they're so deep at the edge that, Trey Moore's like, I need to show the NFL I can play linebacker. So they put him there in the spring, and he did well enough that they're leaving him there. But I think Colin Simmons, and they brought in LaAllen Clark from Ohio State, who they love as the defensive ends coach. And I'm sure y'all know about LaAllen.
Good dude.
Good dude. He was a trainer for Brian Jordan down in Houston. He trained guys like Daniil Hunter and Max Crosby and Micah Parsons. He knows what it looks like. I interviewed Daniil Hunter, who's like, this guy really is about the details. He took my game to another level. So I think everyone's interested to see, because Colin Simmons was doing it with raw athletic ability. Now he's getting the technical parts of it, allegedly. We'll see. Ethan Burke is a monster. I mean, he was a monster as a sophomore. This is a kid who played lacrosse. His dad is a lacrosse coach. He's a lefty lacrosse player with an 83-inch wingspan, but he's a monster when it comes to football. I mean, he made big plays in the state championship game for Westlake High School in Austin, and he's made big plays every game he's played in. Like, I couldn't believe they took him off the field as much as they did. He had the huge 4th down stop against A&M on the goal line. And so he's number 91. I think he's a guy that is going to have a big impact this year. And then behind all those guys, they have guys. Colton Vasek is another stud behind Ethan Burke. They brought in Brad Spence from Arkansas, who they brought him in as a linebacker, but then they swapped him and Trey Moore because Spence had 4 sacks at Arkansas last year. They like his ball get off. He's backing up Colin Simmons. And then they have, Landon Jackson's younger brother, Lance Jackson, on that strong side defensive end, who's, 265 as a freshman. He's going to play Saturday. So they feel really good about their pass rush. I think if Simmons is as good as we think he is, then, Texas could end up leading the nation in sacks, because Anthony Hill from the linebacker position had 8 sacks last year, 16.5 tackles for loss, wasn't even 4 forced fumbles, an interception, was not even a finalist for the Buckeyes. His numbers were better than everyone who was a finalist for the Buckeyes. That
Funny
guy's
how that works, isn't it?
Yeah, he's the personality of the defense. They take after him. He's the violence. He smashes blockers. He makes them pay. He's always around the ball. Just an incredibly instinctive. I think, Ohio State fans who have had the great linebackers, AJ Hawk and, Kuzno, they're going to appreciate number 0 for Texas on Saturday, because the guy plays football.
Football. It's football season. I was at a high school game last Friday, and we'll be at one this Friday night before going to the stadium on Saturday. So it's going to be, it's unfortunate that this is a noon game, because that Tennessee game last December was one of the most electric environments that I can remember in my 40 years of probably going to games there. And it's just unfortunate that this is at noon. The weather is going to be good, like 71 degrees high. So, everybody will be out and having a great time. But unfortunately, you got to cut it short and head to the stadium, or you're going to miss the kickoff. So
where does the 05 Ohio State Texas game rank?
That's like a top 10 environment, I would think, if not top 5. That and USC. People talk about USC in 2009 was a big deal. Notre Dame in 1995 was a big deal. Obviously, Michigan is kind of a different thing, because it's a rivalry, but it's also in November, and people are all bundled up, like this, as opposed to going bonkers. But that's those games have been obviously a big deal. But I think Texas in the modern era, let's say in this century, is top 5 easily in terms of the environment at the stadium for that game. I remember it much better than I do the Notre Dame game that was played there 3 years ago. So that, of course, the Notre Dame game was one you could put that on and it would put you to sleep. The Texas game, the 2 things I remember from that game, Anthony Schlegel, who's from Texas and came to Ohio State, I think by way of the Air Force, I believe, was a linebacker, and he came on a blitz. And Vince Young is standing dead in the middle of the pocket. And here's Schlegel at like 240 pounds. And he comes on a dead blitz, and he just bounces off of Vince Young. And Vince Young stands in and hits his guy down the middle of the field for a 50-yard gain after he'd been hit by the blitzing linebacker. That was a huge play in the game that helped Texas get into scoring position on one drive. And then obviously the play to Limas Swede, I think, to win the game. I was standing at Ohio State. You could go down in the last 5 minutes of the game. So I was, Texas is driving into that corner, driving into the north end zone. So I'm standing down there, and he catches it right in front of me. And it was pretty clear to me, he landed flat back inbounds, no juggle or anything. And I don't think they had quite as sophisticated a video board then as they do now, but it was pretty apparent what it was going to be. And obviously it withstood the video review and was the right call. And man, Vince Young was the man. That was that was something. Ohio State really screwed up. Troy Smith had been suspended for taking extra benefits for the first couple games. And so they started Justin Zwick and didn't score. And by the time they put Troy Smith in the game, I think it was already 10-0. And Troy's playing catch up and trying to feverishly get him back into it. And then Troy obviously never came out of the lineup the rest of his time at Ohio State, including the following year when, got to say, Texas, one of the great places in college football to go watch a game. I loved my time down there, looking so much forward to going back to Austin, a great American city next year. And, Ohio State kind of caught Texas, with McCoy making one of his first starts for Texas, kind of caught them, in that moment where they were kind of between dynasties, so to speak, because they got back up on top of college football again a few years, later with McCoy. But just 24/7. Laurinaitis had a huge game. Teddy Ginn caught the big touchdown pass from Smith, and two tremendous games. And if we get one that lives up to that, or even the Fiesta Bowl went down to the final play, or one like last year. I mean, if Texas scores, it's 21-14. In your opinion, with whatever it was, 2.5 minutes to go, it's now 21-20. Does Sark go for two in that position to take the lead with 2.5 minutes to go, or does he just kick the extra point?
My gut instinct is no, because that's the play that, he kicks the extra point because
at home he plays for the tie.
Yeah, and they've struggled with that. They didn't get in first and goal from the one against OU in 2023. They lost that game. They didn't get in from first and goal from the 3 against TCU in 2022. They lost that game. They didn't get in first and goal from the 1 against Ohio State to tie it. They lost the game. Yeah. And Sark, if you ask him about the red zone, and he was asked about it Monday, he said, hey, 2 years ago, we were 50% touchdowns in the red zone. Last year, we were 64% touchdowns in the red zone. We just need to keep improving. Well, that's got to be a mindset. That's got to be a mindset type of play. And, it went haywire wrong. And the defensive call right before halftime to blitz a DB and drop everyone else 20 yards, and you get busted by a screen because everyone's out of their lane. That was one of the worst defensive calls I've ever seen in my 34 years of covering Texas. I mean, and that's a propensity of Pete Kwiatkowski. He's fantastic. I'm not saying that, but he gets into the kind of don't want to give up the big play. You got a bunch of greyhounds up there. Let him play a normal down of defense. And, but you send Anthony Hill 20 yards backwards, and then Ohio State's got 3 offensive linemen, right in front of Travion Henderson. And it was a disaster. So those 2 plays will be remembered by Texas fans, forever, because that was a game. Texas could have won that game. Yeah. And they didn't. And that was a national championship caliber football team last year.
No doubt.
And you get these windows, and I think Texas thinks this year is a window. And if Arch is back next year, that's they need a national championship in the next 2 years. I know that's unbelievably demanding, but with Arch Manning at quarterback, Texas fans are going to think, okay, we could have won a national championship last year. We didn't. Mm-hmm. We got to get it this year. You've got Anthony Hill and Colin Simmons together. Next year, Anthony Hill will be gone. Colin Simmons will still be there. Maybe Arch is still there, but you gotta win it when you got the dogs to win it. And Ohio State went and got Will Howard. I don't think anyone was convinced about Will Howard. Texas had beaten Will Howard every time. And then, he came to life in those playoffs, and they changed up their running, didn't they? Didn't Ohio State go to more of a gap scheme in the playoff than
Yeah, I believe
Gotta
so.
make this up.
They had to change some things up because the offensive line was just a shambles by the end of the regular season. The Michigan game, they couldn't get any. I mean, that was just terrible. They couldn't get anything accomplished. I wanted to throw in, you brought up the goal line. Kevin, the goal line for Ohio State last year on defense, that was a calling card for Ohio State. We think about the Penn State game hinged on a goal line stand, the Texas game hinged on that goal line stand, and several others that were remarkable. And now you have not 8 new starters on the defense. Are they going to be able to keep people out of the end zone when they get into the red zone inside the 10-yard line? I don't know what your thought is about it, but that to me is something I'm going to be watching in this game. Is if Texas gets it inside the 10, is it 7 or is it 3?
Well, I mean, if I knew the answer to that, I would probably cash in everything I
In
had,
Vegas,
and
yeah.
I would make bets and everything else. And the only bet that I feel good about in this game is the under.
Yeah.
As you know, so I guess by extension, I think that Ohio State will do okay with its red zone defense. But sleepy noon game. I don't care how many towels are out there to be waved around and everything else. I mean, I watched week 0 and it wasn't the most palatable football that I watched. I mean, granted, I couldn't
Kansas State game. Woo.
Well, I couldn't tell you what yard anybody was on in that Kansas State Iowa State game. Apparently they don't have field paint in Ireland. But
who knew the fight between Avery Johnson's dad and his brother would be the highlight of that game?
Those poor people.
Most life that K-State showed in there. I think Ohio State has, when you sit there and you have Arvell Reese, when you have Sonny Styles, when you have some of the defensive backs who are going to come crashing in, when you have Edric Houston and Caden McDonald in the middle of the line. I mean, there's certainly, they got the Jimmies and the Joes to be able to do it, but, being able to stone teams in those types of situations is it's talent, it's mindset, it's execution, it's some luck. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it, and I can't extrapolate yet what I think we're going to see, but it certainly was a calling card last year.
One thing that stood out to me in going back over the 2005 game, there were 9 field goals attempted in that game.
And OSU missed. Josh Houston was 5 of 6, and he missed one with 5 minutes to go and gave Texas possession to go the other way for the winning touchdown. If he kicks that, then probably the best Texas can do is tie the game there late. So it might have iced it for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, that and the Hamby, bobble.
Hamby drop. Yep.
So
would you believe that the Columbus Dispatch yesterday, I know newspapers are a dying breed, but Joey Kaufman, one of the 2 beat writers for the Columbus Dispatch, did about a 30-inch article on Ryan Hamby, how he had to cope with being the GOAT of that game and how he's gone on with the rest of his life, didn't really have an NFL career as a tight end. And it was just kind of a poignant type thing, that he got death threats for dropping that pass wide open in the end zone, unfortunately. And I think Zwick is the one who threw that pass, I believe. And if he catches that pass from Zwick, does that change the entire trajectory of Ohio State football regarding Troy Smith? Does Zwick out of that job?
Yeah, would have put him up 10 late in the third.
Yeah, 25-15. Yep.
It might have been too much to overcome.
As soon as you
But
make
I think the field goal kickers are.
I was just going to say, as soon as Steve made the death threat comment, and how ridiculous those people are, obviously. Chip, you being from the part of the country you are, I instantly thought of Jackie Smith, who's the most famous of all time in regards to dropping a huge pass and being vilified.
That broke my heart. I was a Cowpokes fan at that point.
Oh, you and me.
Yeah, that was brutal. But I do think the field goal kickers are going to play a role in this game because I think the defenses are going to, force some stops in the red zone. And Texas has a new kicker, Mason Shipley, who came from Texas State, put up good numbers there. But that's the Sun Belt, baby.
Yeah.
It ain't the horseshoe. So
we wear caps and sleeves at this level, boys.
Yeah. That's a mystery for Texas.
Excellent stuff. Chip, we so much appreciate you stopping by. I want to give you the opportunity to let everyone know what you're working on this week and where to find it.
Yeah, horns247.com. Jump on board with the 24/7 sports, the preeminent 24/7 sports network. Great place to be. And, I do a show every weekday, 2 to 4 on the Texas Sports Unfiltered YouTube channel and app. We'll be talking a lot of Texas, Ohio State the rest of this week. So appreciate y'all having me.
Chip, thanks for being here. Enjoy the game. Have a good trip. And it's great to see you again. And
Yes.
Thanks for being so gracious of your time.
See you Saturday.
Yep, looking forward to it.
All right. Before we let these two tee it up for the end of the show here, want to show everyone that we've got merch, Ohio State VOCFB merch. And so we have dropped the link there in the chat. Just there you go. You can find it right there. If I can find the link's there in the chat once again. And we've got a lot of great stuff there. Again, this is quality stuff. Tried to find that happy medium between quality product and good price for you. So tumblers and mugs and gear and apparel. So check it out right there. Kevin, what's the good word for you this week?
Tail the tape is in the can. I'll run it tomorrow. Try and run a by the numbers piece maybe on Friday, just looking at the Texas Ohio State series history. Just looking forward to the game at this point. Just ready to see what this team looks like. Be able to, either put some of my thoughts in pen because they ended up coming true, or erase the ones that weren't right and adjust and say, no, I had it right all along. But keep it locked in over at BuckeyeHuddle.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Kevin_Noon. Should have a lot coming in, and we'll start turning up the volume on Twitter probably around 9 a.m. on Saturday.
What's the good word, Steve?
Well, we're doing a lot of the same things over at bucknuts.com. It's going to be a big recruiting weekend, obviously, with such a big game. And I put up my story about how the two programs compare in a lot of different categories, like national championships, and also a look at the 4 previous games. As we said, they were all thrilling games when you think about it. And I think we're in for that again this time around. I don't need quite as much drama as we had back in January down in Texas, but thankfully the stakes, since it's not a national semifinal game, are not quite as high this time around. I think the winner is obviously in the playoff with a 10-2 record, and possibly even a 9-3 record if it would somehow fall to that. But no doubt the winner is in at 10-2. The loser would have a feather in their cap that they at least played a top 5 team in the non-conference, but would probably need to be 10-2 to get in. So, or win your conference, whatever. The loser could go on and win their conference and get in. But, there are some other games this weekend. I mean, like, Nebraska, Cincinnati's a little bit intriguing. LSU and Clemson, obviously, and Alabama and Florida State. Is Florida State as bad as they were last year or as good as they were the year before? So, is Alabama ever going to be good again? So I'm just kidding. So, yeah, Notre Dame, Miami. Is Miami back? I mean, or is Notre Dame for real? I mean, those are all questions that will be answered on the next edition of SOAP. So here we go.
It is a decent slate of games. Well, I am going to play the VOCFB bets rollout, so I will let you two get to the rest of your week. Kevin, thanks for being here. Steve, you as well.
When is the handicapping show? When does that go live?
The handicapping show. So we've got I do records that will be posted, and we've got our picks that are locked away for our members.
Okay.
if that's what you're alluding to.
Okay. Is that already live, or is it going live later today or tomorrow?
Well, we'll be posting our picks, today. And because we've got Thursday picks, and then we'll also have signed a deal with a number of platforms, FanDuel, DraftKings, etc. And we have to pull that together for the details, because you guys know that anytime you go the wagering route, there's a lot of guidelines that need to be executed, and I don't know that our hosts they need to be put on board in terms of how that's to be executed. So we're in the process of doing all that.
We're at the point of the year where, like, I have golf league tomorrow night, and I told my buddies we're going to go to this bar, and they'll probably have baseball on one channel and the Jackasses like on True TV on the other channel. And I'm going to have to grab the DirecTV remotes and go FS1, Big Ten Network, ESPN, SEC Network. I'm going to have to grab the remote and get all the games on. And, don't be shy when you go to like a Winking Lizard or somewhere. If there's a game you want to watch, let's all condition these people that they need to change the channel and put our game on, because that's the only way to live this time of year.
No doubt. Again, Buckeye Huddle with Kevin, and the tail of the tape is coming out on Thursday, correct?
Thursday morning, 9 a.m.
There we go. And Steve with Bucknuts. And we'll leave you with this. College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select a betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.